This is low light footage from the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. And today I'm going to show you the exact settings I use as well as my approach to filming in low light with the Osmo Pocket 3 in order to get a more cinematic image. And the key to good low light footage isn't just boosting up your ISO. It's about controlling your exposure, choosing when to prioritize your highlights or your shadows. And if you're shooting in D-Log-M on the Osmo Pocket 3, you'll definitely need a good color grade. And I currently use a film emulation plugin called Dehancer Pro to color grade my footage, which I have a full tutorial breaking down my workflow using this plugin. And if you're interested in trying it for yourself, they have monthly, annual, and lifetime purchase options. And you can use my promo code Victor to get 10% off at checkout. All right, so first click the icon in the bottom left and make sure you're in video mode, not the low light mode. Reason why is because I want to shoot in the D-Log-M color profile, but you can't shoot in that color profile in low light mode. Next, swipe up and you're going to want to make sure you're at 4K 30 frames per second. I know 24 frames per second is the cinematic frame rate, but because I shoot all my daylight footage on the Osmo Pocket 3 in 30 frames per second, we'll stick to 30 FPS for nighttime as well, just to keep the frame rate consistent throughout all my footage. This also allows a consistent and easier editing process because I can keep my timeline frame rate to 30 FPS as well. Swipe down. Next, from the right of the screen, we're gonna swipe left, and in the top right, toggle on Pro mode. And now for the exposure, click that, and we're gonna switch to auto exposure. On the left where it says EV, which stands for exposure value, we're gonna drop that anywhere between 0.3 to 0.7 EV. This slightly underexposes your footage, which is nice because it preserves a little bit of the highlights that you might get from your bright light source. And if I'm shooting something like neon lights, I'll even drop anywhere from like -1.3 to -1.7 EV. That way I can preserve the colors of those bright neon lights and they don't just look like white blown out blobs. But for most cases I can leave my EV around -0.3 to -0.7 EV, because pocket cameras and iPhones, they tend to slightly overexpose in my experience, so that's just kind of what works for me. And the reason I choose auto exposure over manual exposure is because I like to treat my Pocket 3 like a run and gun point and shoot camera. This just makes it easier. I can turn the camera on and start shooting right away without having to jump in here and adjust a bunch of settings. For my ISO range, I always leave it at ISO 50 to 800. This basically means in any environment, the max ISO your camera will reach is 800. This is my safe range for clean footage because anything above ISO 800 starts to get noticeably noisy for my taste. If I'm in a really dark environment, I will switch it to ISO 50 to 1600, but that's only when I absolutely need to. In 99% of cases, I'm gonna keep it at ISO 50 to 800. Click confirm. Next, we're gonna click our white balance and we're going to switch this to manual. Now, if I'm shooting around sunset, I'll keep the white balance between 54 to 5600 Kelvin, just to keep that nice warmth of the sunset. And if I'm shooting at nighttime where my only source of light is gonna be artificial lighting, I'll drop it anywhere from 3000 to 4500 Kelvin. And the reason I manually adjust my white balance instead of using auto is because this makes it easier to color grade so the colors aren't constantly shifting around because of the auto adjusting white balance. So I always keep it in manual to color grade. Click confirm. Now for my color profile, if you don't want to color grade at all, if you just want decent colors straight out of camera, you can stick to the normal color profile. But my preference is to switch to D-Log-M. This is gonna give me a super flat desaturated image, which gives me the most flexibility to color grade. Scroll down, I leave my breathing compensation on and my focus mode to continuous. And then for my image adjustment, let's just click that on the bottom, switch to custom. And I'm gonna set my sharpness to -2 because these digital camera sensors are already super sharp. So setting it to -2 kind of takes away some of that digital edge you get and gives you a bit more of a filmic look. For noise reduction, I leave it at 0. I prefer to add my noise reduction in DaVinci Resolve instead of baking it in camera, because once you add noise reduction in camera, you can't undo it and your footage might look mushy, but you can always add some more in post-production if you need. Then click confirm and you are ready to shoot. Tip 1, low light doesn't mean no light. Every low light shot I've shown you in this video has a light source, whether it is lights from the park or the city, neon lights. A lot of these shots are at Disneyland, so even when it is absolute dark nighttime, there's always a ton of lights in the surrounding. If there's no light in your environment, no camera setting will fix your low light footage. So the truth is you have to have a light source, whether it is strong fluorescent lights, neon lights, something that brings light to your image. And a good way to think about it is if the environment looks super dark to your eyes, it's definitely gonna look terrible on camera. Tip 2, control your exposure even when using auto. And the way to do this is to adjust your exposure value depending on your shot. In traditional low light settings, you can leave your EV between -0.3 to -0.7. If you're shooting super bright neon lights and you want to capture the vibrant colors of those neon lights, drop your EV down to -1.3. That way, instead of your light source just looking like bright white overexposed blobs, you can see the vibrant color of those neon lights. And you can set your EV to 0 if your low light is fairly flat and balanced. So you're not just exposing for brightness, you're exposing for the scene that you're shooting. Tip 3, don't fear the shadows. Shadows can be what makes your low light footage look cinematic. For example, with these aquarium shots that I got, the silhouettes of the people add a clear separation between my foreground and the background, which feels intentional and adds depth. So if you look at a scene and you see these bright highlights and deep shadows, don't be afraid to get a nice silhouette and showcase the background or your environment. Tip 4 is to fix your noise in post-production. If you notice in my settings, I don't boost my noise reduction to the max, I just leave it at 0. And that's because in-camera noise reduction can sometimes make your footage look mushy, and once that noise reduction is baked in, you really can't do anything to fix that. So I typically like to bring my footage into DaVinci Resolve, add a little bit of noise reduction after I color grade, and this gives me more control and the ability to choose how much noise reduction I want to apply afterwards. Tip number 5, try to get your white balance right in camera. White balance can be adjusted in post, but the flexibility of the files coming out of the Osmo Pocket 3, even when shooting in D-Log-M, still has its limits. Take this shot for example. I accidentally left my white balance in 5600 because I was shooting outside in bright daylight prior, so I had to extremely adjust my white balance to make it way cooler, and it did the job for the most part. However, the tones of the color do still look strange because the white balance I shot at was intended for daylight and not these super warm fluorescent lights in. So try to set your white balance close to how you'd want it in camera, and it'll make it much easier to color grade in post-production. For sunset, I stick to around 54 to 5600, and for nighttime and artificial light, it can be anywhere from 3000 to 4500 depending on the artificial light source. Alright everyone, so those are my settings and how I approach shooting low light with the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. If you do have any questions, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And huge thank you for watching. I will see you next Tuesday and have a great week. Peace.